have Anurag Dubey as our speaker, who is a drilling performance engineer. He completed his bachelor's from UPES Dehradun and mastered his further studies from Andhra University. With an experience of good 9+ years, he has been associated with Datacode, the Petrolink, and Schlumberger. So he has been associated to the Schlumberger from 2018 till date. So this was about Mr. Anurag Dubey. The another speaker for today is Mr. Shirish Raja, who carries an experience of 9+ years today. He completed his bachelor's from UPES itself from the batch of 2008 and 2012 and pursued his master's from PGPM in energy. He has been a part of organizations like Deloitte and currently is the founder of GeoIn Services. So for those who are not very well aware of what GeoIn is, I'll just give a small sneak peek here. So at GeoIn, they believe in offering high quality wholesale and trader of digital meter, survey instrument, and more. They are a service provider of mining services, GIS services, survey service, and more. He is undoubtedly a unique talent. So I believe that we can begin with the questions. So I'll just tell you a flow of this webinar. We have few questions from a lot of people and we combined them and consolidated in total 12 to 14 questions. So after we exhaust all of them, you guys are free to ask the questions in the chat box and I'll make sure I convey to the both the guest speakers and your questions and your doubts can easily get answered. So let's just begin with it. I believe, Anurag, can we begin?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so do we have Shirish yet or is he still facing issues with the internet connectivity?
Well, let's hear his voice. Shirish, you here?
Are you here?
Shirish, you here, man?
Well, I think he's still struggling with it. So nevertheless, we can start with the question and answer round with you for starters. Okay, so the first question here is, with the underlying razzle-dazzle of the petroleum industry, what is your advice to the students through the lens of expectations versus reality in the petroleum sector?
Well, overall, it's a very nice question to start with. And at the outset, thanks to you and your team for inviting me for this webinar. In fact, just to let you know, I just came from the rig site and I was a bit in flurry to attend this because I was overwhelmed to be a part of it. So thanks to you. Okay, now coming to the question. We completely understand that industry is in a very drastic situation and a lot of fluctuations have taken place. So now what we expect in reality and what we expect and anticipate and what is happening in reality are two different aspects. To be very frank, say for example, when I joined university in 2008, so that time, say for example, any organization like Schlumberger where I'm working in currently, they used to hire 12 to 15 people from a batch. Yeah. But now if we see the same Schlumberger coming to our campuses and hiring people, they won't hire 15 people. They have reduced the number since the business has reduced a lot. So I would say the first aspect is the count of the people which are gonna to be hired. Second is the financial aspects for the hiring, say the placement packages. Earlier, when the industry was on its peak, people were being hired for 20 lakhs per annum, say 30 lakhs, 35 lakhs, depending on the job where they are working. But now this term has also gone down. So now, say for example, as if there are students who are graduating this year or those who are interning this year, see, we are always under impression that, okay, say if I get a job in Schlumberger, I would be getting something around 20L or 25L, but this is not the reality. We have to face a harsh challenge that the salary packages overall have reduced in the industry, and we have to, we have to compensate with that. At this point of time, industry is surviving based on different new platforms, which I'm gonna be discussing at later stages. But expectations versus reality is a big mirror, and we have to consider that basing on the fact of the current situation. So I think I am done with this answer.
Yeah, that was a very thorough answer, to be honest, Anurag. And that is right. We really need to understand the difference between the expectations and realities, because what might seem really flashy from outside should not be the real case when you actually go into it.
But
So,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just another point to add here about the strategies, which is the last part of the question, right? So as far as the strategies are concerned, see, we as a petroleum engineer, since most of the people are belonging to the petrol oil and gas industry, we think that we will be doing core job, right? Even when I was a graduate, I was pursuing my graduation, I also used to think the same, because the universities, the impression what they create is of the same aspect, but in reality it does not happen what is happening right now. So since there is, so we always say, okay, in third year when we pursue our internships or so on, we always think, we always have that zeal, okay, let's be a drilling engineer, let's be a reservoir engineer, keeping the fact in mind, okay, this is my AOI. But I would like to stress on a fact, please, this mentality would not work at this point of time for a minimum of 6 months. Trust me. And probably after Q4 of 2020, in 2021, things gonna change, and we can come back to our same original mentality when things gonna be streamlined.
okay, thank you so much, Anurag. So the second question for you is, with the rising competition and the uncertainties, along with the constant need to evolve, how
Yeah.
can a fresher from the petroleum domain or maybe any other domain can prepare himself for not only to enter in the industry at a shorter term, but also to survive in the longer term? So what your views are on this question?
Okay. Well, it's a very blunt question, because now competition has arisen a lot. Okay, if I talk about the timings of 2000, say below 2010, let me cite my example because it is very easier to explain about ourselves, right? When I joined university, so in India, in the entire India, there were not more than 3 to 4 universities and colleges who were offering petroleum engineering. But now, at this point of time, we have more than 25 universities and colleges who are offering the same course. So in human count, the competition has increased. And trust me, the corporate level, what used to happen in 2008 and the expectation from the candidate, that has also changed a lot. So if I talk about, say, keeping this competition fact in mind, and in corporate, there is a methodology of survival of the fittest. So we have to keep outside from the line what others are following. So we need to stress on different interpersonal skills along with technical domain. Now, say for example, if I'm very core in drilling, nobody gives a heed for it. Nobody gives a damn. Okay, you are a drilling engineer. We don't have a job for drilling engineer. But if you are a drilling engineer along with with aspects of data science or say business analytics, yes, that would make sense for me. So at the same time, we have to be we have to be accounted yourself, and we have to be accustomed for different platforms and courses which in turn is not related to the aspirations of core engineering, but at the same time with other interpersonal skills along with our analytical skills.
Wow, that was very insightful. So I believe Shirish has joined us. So Shirish, can you confirm if you have?
Rupal, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely, I can hear you. Thank you so much for attending the call. And I did give a brief introduction about you and your endeavors for the past few years, but I think you kind of missed it. So I did tell you about your startup and the company to the students. So right now we are asking questions to Anurag. Since I've emailed you the questions beforehand, so you can see if you have to add insights on his part of questions. So please feel to go ahead.
Fine. So right now you're doing it with Anurag session?
Yeah, exactly.
Fine.
Yeah. Okay. So in case you have any insights or pointers to share, everybody would love to hear that.
Fine.
Okay. So I come to the third question to Anurag, and that is, COVID-19 has made all of us vulnerable and susceptible. We all are aware of the threats that it poses to the economy and our future as individuals. And that is just the tip of the iceberg that we can right now see. So how would you suggest the students and the existing employees to cope up with the contemporary problems, and what can we do to prepare ourselves for the worst? When I say the contemporary problems, I mean the job loss, the frozen hiring, and the budget layouts. Over to you, Anurag.
Okay, actually, I'm very sorry. Yeah, I have listened to your question partially, but in the end, you can let me know whether I have answered it completely or not. So you are asking me, see, this is COVID-19 pandemic going on, and so what are your suggestions for the existing employees and the fellow mates, right? Okay, in terms
Exactly.
of bulk layoffs and all. Okay. So to summarize this, yeah, we completely understand COVID-19 has changed the entire drama of this industry, not only restricted to oil and gas, but other industries as well. Say, for example, aviation, travel and tourism, everything has been affected. And just let me cite you an example. Other industries as a whole, they are related to oil and gas industry. Now, say, for example, the crude, what we extract from the subsurface is being directly used, say, machineries or heavy industries such as factories and all. So now we have extracted everything. We have stored it, but nobody is there to utilize it since there is no work. Yeah, because in order to have this work ongoing, we need people. And COVID is an aspect which works on humanitarian grounds. Since humans are not being involved, everything has been stopped. So I would stress on a fact that, okay, this situation is a bit clumsy, and we actually need to pay some heed at this point of time. But I would like to say that for the people, those who are working at this point of time, please not only concentrate on your jobs, just try to open up your minds, have being influenced by other things, increase your skill sets, knowledge in other domains as well. Because since we are affected, others are also affected. So it's the same transition. So I would say not only restrict to our core job. Say I am a drilling performance engineer at this point of time. So by this point of time, I have understood and evolved myself to other aspects. Say, for example, now I have been doing many courses related to cloud computing, which are directly or indirectly related to my aspect, because now the world has come to digitization 4.0. And just to let you know, every company in this world has restructuring. Even with my organization, Schlumberger, earlier I used to be part of, still yesterday, 12 o'clock midnight, I used to be part of Software Integrated Solution, SIS. But now I'm a part of Digitalization 4.0. So things have changed in a flurry, in a whisk of time. So I would say, do not restrict yourself to your current job. Do not restrict yourself to your core knowledge as a student. Think overall, understand the aspiration, understand the air which is flowing, and then take decisions. And now as a whole, if I say for the people who do not have and who have lost their jobs at this point of time, see, this is a hard time for everyone. I would say overall in oil and gas industry, if there are say 10K people, just cite an example, 4K people have lost the job. Again, I'm just giving this fact based on my organization. So people have gone on leave of absence. People do not have jobs. Only the lucky ones, those who have jobs, they are on pay cut for till yesterday. So let us see what the God and industry had decided for us in upcoming quarters, say Q3 and Q4. And do not lose hope. Good things are coming up but in a different shape, and we have to get ready for that. That's it.
Okay, so if I have to summarize it for all the participants, what Anurag meant to say, that you have to be very flexible with your approaches. You have to be very particular about the things happening throughout and read about it, be updated, and expand your knowledge base and your skill set to survive and thrive with the industry. So am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Shirish, do you want to add any pointers to this, or what Anurag has just
No, so Anurag has covered everything. He's covered everything very precisely, very well told. And looking at the current scenario, you need to be flexible. You need to come out with an open mind. You need to know what the market demand is, and then you need to adapt yourself accordingly. So my friend was very right over here, and you need to be flexible in terms of how you manage your knowledge, what the industry requires, what the market requires. So yeah, that way you need to be very flexible with that.
Yes, that makes complete sense. So I'd be asking you a few questions, Shirish, since you have been quiet for a while. So everyone, as I have already introduced you, Mr. Shirish Raja, he's an experience of 9+ years until today. He has completed his bachelor's from UPES Dehradun and his master's from PGPM. He's a part of organizations like Deloitte in the past and is currently the founder of GeoIn Services. So for those who are not aware of GeoIn, well, they believe in offering high quality wholesaler and traders to digital meter, survey instrument, and more. We, like the people at GeoIn, are a service provider of mining service, GIS service, survey service, and more. He is undoubtedly a unique talent. So, Shirish, back to you. I'll have first question. So, the COVID-19 outbreak is forcing companies to explore how they can survive while grappling with the crisis of mammoth proportions. So, do you think laying off employees in an economic revival can be a good economic revival strategy? Or there are better strategies that can be brought into the action and adopted by the industry as well?
So, Rupal, what I feel is that an employee is a resource, and laying off your resource, laying off somebody who has been a part of your organization, uplifting your organization, creating profits for your organization is not the right way to go ahead. So, you're creating a bad image in the market. You're creating a bad brand name in the market. So, if you would look at companies like Tata, Tata speaks of its brands because Tata is a company that respects its employees. So you need to respect your resources. Okay, now if you basically look at the present situation, COVID is a very tough situation. The situation has become so tough that businesses are shutting down, companies are shutting down, startups are not able to survive. You're burning cash, finances are getting burned. But I would say that everything in the market, in the market comes with a new opportunity. So you need to start thinking out of the box. You need to come up with new innovative ideas. I would give you an example. So a company Droom. So Droom basically is into reselling of second-hand cars, second-hand bikes, and they are basically into services of four-wheelers. Now, Droom in this pandemic situation when there is no sales at all, it's basically lost all its sales. Droom came out with a new innovative idea of basically sanitizing your vehicles, telling people that, hey, you go to your offices, you go in cars, and is your car well protected? Are your vehicles well protected? So that's what, everything comes with an opportunity. Every situation in the market comes with an opportunity. It's how you best grab it. And in the future, I think after the COVID situation gets over, Room has added another new, has diversified itself into a new portfolio. It has diversified itself into a new innovative idea, new business. So everything in the market comes with a plus, it comes with a minus. So I think it would be that you go with a more innovative approach, be more optimistic, and see what the market demands, see what you best you can fit in the current situation, what's the best thing that you can fit in the current situation, and then go ahead. But I don't think so laying off your resources would be the right idea, because eventually the market is going to open up. Your resources are going to be your strength. And if you respect your resources, you respect your employees, you get it back. And I would say that a loyal employee would work for you more. He would work for you more. He would think about the organization more. But if you create an image telling that an employee that, hey, till we are doing good, we are in profits, you're there. But the moment the company starts downsizing, we are going to put you off. So I don't think so that's a good approach. So this is business. So there are going to be ups and downs, but laying off your resources is not a good idea.
Okay, so that actually gives me an idea to share something of my own. So, in the book Economics in One Lesson, Henry Hazlitt actually put light to the topic that during the World War II, when a lot of destruction has happened, that eventually was a blessing in disguise for a lot of people who were making furnitures, who were making infrastructures. It gave them business once the war was over. So I believe that this can be a really overwhelming situation right now to cope up with. But yeah, it does have a promising future after everything sets down and the dust settles. Okay, that's great. So I have another question for you, Shirish.
Sure.
So with the underlying unpredictabilities in the business, can we ever think of having a stable career for oil and gas domain? And if not, what can be our plausible or possible alternatives to make a shift? So this question is basically for the freshers because they are seeing the oil and gas industry. So I really feel for the students and the graduates of year 2020, when they have to face such a downfall in the industry they wanted to pursue in. So how would you want them to, understand it and maybe share some other alternatives apart from the oil and gas industry. So that would be great.
So Rupal, I would just tell people, so if this is something that you're very passionate about, I would first emphasize, go ahead with that. Because the scenarios in the market are going to change. Looking at the last 7 years of trend, where oil and gas, where oil was around $140 to $150 per barrel, way back in 2013, 2014, and you have seen how the paradigm has shifted. Oil prices going into to $30 per barrel, $40 per barrel, $10 per barrel, finally going into negative prices also. And then and slightly the oil prices have come up. So the market scenarios are going to change. It is going to change, and predicting, looking at the future, nobody can tell because of the competition going on between the shale and the sheikhs. So it's basically the Middle East and US, both of them trying to get a monopoly on the market because of the competition going on, and looking at the current scenarios that are going in the US. Because earlier the problem with shale gas was that you could explore it, but you could not drill out the shale oil because of the shale oil being very tight. No, they were all porous, but they were not permeable enough in order to drill out oil. But because of the advanced technologies, because of advance in drilling, advance in hydraulic fracturing, shale oil has been, so you can now start producing oil from shale rocks. And that's the reason US came into market challenging the sheikhs, and thus this war for the oil prices started. So Middle East, that was once a monopoly, is no longer a monopoly, and US is trying to take over it. So that's the reason that the oil prices have been, so they have been volatile. So sometimes they have been, and mostly they have been decreasing. But in the near scenario, what I feel is that perhaps they would come at a platform where the oil prices are going to be stable. This has happened in the past also. And what I think, so that looking at the present scenario and looking at the future scenario, so there would be a time where oil prices are going to get stable. Things are going to get better because nobody is going to survive with such low oil prices. Companies are not going to survive. And till when are they going to start till when they can burn their cash reserves? So cash reserves are also limited. So I think so it's going to get stable. Things will turn out to be, eventually they'll turn out to have a positive response. But we'll have to wait for the right time. And if you would ask me for a shift, I would just tell students at this point of time, you're still at a very tender age. Explore yourself, learn. I would just tell, know more about yourself. It is not important that if you're a petroleum engineer, then you need to survive. If you're very passionate about the industry, learn things, how to survive in the industry, because surviving is just not all about knowledge. It's about how you know yourself. Oil and gas industry can include finance, it can include operation, it could include strategy making, it can include a lot of things. So I would just tell that, just know yourself, and if you're very passionate about the industry, try to place yourself over there. Just know in which is going to be the best fit for you for the oil and gas industry. And okay, and if other than the oil and gas industry, if you would ask me that the students want to know what is going to be the next shift, so what is going to be the new energy. So yeah, renewables are coming, and they are basically, so the market is attracting a lot of investments in renewable energy. But yeah, that still is going to take time. And yeah, that's also a good sector. Interested people can go ahead, but I would still emphasize people to basically concentrate on something they are passionate about.
That's great.
Well,
So I believe that this, yeah, Anurag, please. Yeah,
I'm
please
sorry
do
to interrupt
answer.
you. Just to add a point here. See, every career is like a sine wave. In engineering, we say sine wave. All consists of crust and troughs. So, as an engineer, as a pass out, we have to understand the amplitude of ourselves, which is knowing ourselves. So, if we are passionate enough, our amplitude will be very higher. We will never go down. We will never reach to the trough. Understand our amplitude, have passion about it, apply it, and things can do wonders for you.
And Rupal's market, and things will eventually change. Companies will not survive with such low oil prices. So finally, I think US and the Middle East are going to come at a point where the oil prices are going to get stable. And let's just hope
Yeah,
this
very
time it crosses
optimistic.
$150.
Mm-hmm.
Let's
Yeah,
just
please
hope this time it crosses. And that's what I mean. Let's just hope it crosses $150. And I even saw a research where people predict oil prices to cross $200 per barrel also. Let's see. Let's see how the paradigm shifts. Let's see what the future awaits. But yeah, I would say let's all be optimistic about the future, and let's see how basically things are going to turn out.
Yeah, there are a lot of if and buts because it's like it's the matter with every industry, I believe. Like there cannot be anything very particular cannot be said right now because this is an ever changing era, and yeah, change is inevitable, be it any industry. So yeah,
True.
that completely makes sense and it joins all the dots. So the other question I would like to ask both of you, because Anurag also mentioned about the digitization in the previous answers of his. So given the optics of digitization in almost every possible industry today, to what degree have we made a shift in the oil and gas in the real terms, and how openly we have adapted to the digitization market?
Okay,
Anurag, you like to
so
go first?
yeah, definitely. Okay, so I would say 100%. Just to cite my example, we at Schlumberger, we used to handle 110 rigs of ADNOC, which was before pandemic. Now rigs have reduced to 70. And with this, the only positive what I can get out of this COVID stuff is digitization has come into picture and industry has moved to digitization 4.0 concept. Everywhere, wherever you see this restructuring of organization, everywhere we have a segment known as digitalization of oil and gas. You won't believe, I used to go offices, and due to this restriction of data in National Oil Company, which is ADNOC, we cannot even take data even in a flash drive or any confidentiality matters. But now we are working from home. Every possible employee of ADNOC is working from home, those who were residing in the same office and working for the same data. So this pandemic has opened doors for digitalization completely. And with this, new processes and new projects have come up, which are eventually changing the entire course of the industry. Everyone, even say for example, in order to take remote decisions, earlier drilling engineer used to go on rig sites. Now they are not. They are utilizing the concept of real-time operation centers, monitoring their data and taking decision and doing the same operation. So I would say the wells which used to got drilled in 30 days, still it is getting drilled in 30 days with the help of digitalization completely. And there is no need of any human intervention going at the rig sites and doing their stuff. Only limited people are there at the rig sites, and rest other staff is supporting them using the technology. Another point which I would like to stress here, the world is open for smart upstream project. So this project, just to cite an example, this was being started by Saudi Aramco, and now it has come to ADNOC at this point of time. So in this, the idea of this project is to bring infrastructure for enhancing the digitalization 4.0 concept. So by this, Saudi Aramco has its own department, which is of more than 1,000 people working on the same concept. Now ADNOC has also started it, and probably in upcoming 1 year, we will be having more than 500 people who will be working on remote drilling concept. And hopefully, if this gets successful, probably if at a rig site there used to be 70 people, they will be reduced to 35. So I would say it has changed completely, and for my case it's 100%.
Uh, yeah, digitization in terms of, you would even look at in terms of geology and geophysics, you now have better, more high resolution images. So the penetration depth from the earlier stages have also increased because of better use of softwares, better use of technologies, and then you're able to analyze the drilling data. You're able to analyze the geology of a particular area. You have aerial surveys. So yeah, so I would say that manual work now has come down. Manual work has come down, and because of digitalization, things have become more easy, and accuracy has increased. People are able to take out more work in less amount of time. So that way, oil and gas is totally shifted. It's totally shifted into a digitization platform, and it's still innovation is continuing in oil and gas to even make it more better. So if you would even look at the audit also in oil and gas, the audit systems have also changed. So it's become completely digitized. So the audit system that used to earlier take months in order to know where there has been a risk or where there has been a little discrepancy, all because of digitization, things have become more transparent and more quicker.
Okay, so I have this question that has been asked from somebody in the audience. So they are asking that it is said that by the end of this year, or maybe starting of 2021, the oil prices may hit $100 per barrel. So is this a hoax, or how true does the statement stand?
Anurag, you're answering. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah, you go ahead, then I will follow you.
Okay, so Rupal, what I feel is at the moment, I don't think so. By end of this year, oil is somewhere going to hit around $100 per barrel. So basically, the thing is with the oil market, like I told you, now the prices are being decided by two countries. It's basically being decided by the US. It's being decided by the Middle East. So it all lies. So whether it's $100 per barrel, whether it's $150 per barrel, it basically lies on what stage they are basically coming with an agreement. But looking at the current scenario, looking at the COVID scenario, so there is a lot of surplus oil. There's a lot of surplus oil. People don't have space, and this is the reason why oil prices went negative, because there was a lot of surplus production that was taking place, and all the reserves were full. And plus, because of the lockdown at several places, there was no transportation. People were not at all using their cars. They were not using. Industries were shut down. Then there was no usage of refined products. So where does all this crude oil go? Okay, for a country like India, it was very easy because we are basically the refinery hub of Asia. For us, crude oil prices is a profit. It's obviously a profit. So what oil we were getting at $150 per barrel, if we're getting it at $50, $60 per barrel, so we are at $100 per barrel profit. But for us also to store that oil when it is not getting used is going to be a loss again. So I don't think so. It's going to touch somewhere around $100 per barrel in the coming future, but it is going to take time. But I don't think so by 2021, this is something that's going to happen. So this battle is still going to continue for several more years, but eventually things will get better.
Okay, that's great. So Anurag, do you want to add any pointers in this one?
Well, completely. I would say, see, as far as my understanding and my hope says, I completely anticipate that by end of 2020 Q4, see, oil prices might hit to $75 per barrel for sure. And hopefully, inshallah, by 2021 June, we will have it more than 90 or 95. This is what my expectation says, but it completely depends on a fact that how the meetings in OPEC goes. The world, see, oil industry is a game of monopoly. Saudi will never let his production down, so as Russia. And at this point, Saudi Aramco has a fleet of 220 rigs, and they have stopped all workover operations. ADNOC had a fleet of 110 rigs. They stopped all workover operations, and rigs have reduced. So now imagine if rigs have reduced, manpower has reduced. Manpower has reduced, so there are no new wells, so production is less. But like Shirish has mentioned, the oil has already been made available in reserves. So somebody has to sell it, right? And at this point of time, nobody wants to sell in loss. So hopefully within coming time, once everything gets streamlined, the oil prices will be surging up for sure. And I expect to be $75 by end of this year.
Okay, that is very good.
And just to mention, this is all speculations based on the facts what we read. And hopefully there might be chances that petroleum economics might go down, might turn up and down. So I would say it's a speculated number, $75 per barrel.
You should basically ask OPEC this question, because OPEC actually has the right answer to this. And yeah, so the oil prices are basically controlled by them. And let's see basically how the industry turns up.
Yeah, but overall, I'm waiting for that meeting, which is there in next week, when all the companies will be regulated by this new terms and conditions, and this new enforcement of restructuring will take place. All depends on OPEC. Completely second this thought.
So to all the students who were asking about their future in oil and gas domain and how much money they're going to earn, so let's start cold emailing all the OPEC countries. So I hope if we can get the answer before the meeting happens.
For sure, so, it's a week left.
So that's actually very positive response, to be honest. Like 75 rupees per barrel, it's not a bad deal considering it just went to negative a couple of months back. So yeah, that is right. So we have plenty of questions on the chat box. So before I get to my own questions, I'll just like to read few of them. So so anybody, like either you or Shirish, whosoever wants to answer, or even you both want to answer, you can definitely go ahead. So the question is, what are the difficulties faced by the employees at industries what should be the aim of a fresher studying petroleum engineering towards industry? So I believe, yeah, you can continue. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty much straightforward question. Yeah, difficulties. First thing is difficulty. What people generally face is to become a best fit for the role. Now, say for example, like I mentioned in my previous question, nobody wants to have a core drilling engineer at this point of time because see, with time, people wants to have a guy who is trainable. Say, for example, I hired you for a drilling engineering job, yeah, but due to certain evidences, or I lost the job, or say I lost the rig, or I lost the department, I will take you to some other department. But by this, people, they take it this in their heart that I was born as a drilling engineer, I cannot accept this job. Come on, you have to be flexible enough. So first thing is fit in. Second thing is how you deal with your work. So say for example, you have to be smart enough to do the work. If you are working for 20 hours in a day, that will not solve the purpose. But if you know how to optimize your task, this will definitely matter. And and the and the third part is which is for the fresher who are studying petroleum engineering at this point of time. See, apart from core engineering job, try to widen yourself in other aspects. Try to attain other skills which will accompany your job. Now, say for example, if I'm a reservoir engineer, I want to be a reservoir engineer. So this does not mean that I will not open energistic site and have understanding of rescue ML, which will give me real-time monitoring of reservoir. Why should I be restricting myself to those flitty curves which were there, say Klinkingberg effect, or I should be referring to what do you call Tariq Ahmed, right? Yeah. So I should be referring to core reservoir engineering books. No, time has changed. So we have to change our mentality, grab different knowledge, different types of knowledges. Everything is available on the web. Try to grab different skills based on your skill set and rule the world.
You should also know what I feel is that Rupal, at this point of time, you should also know what the industry demands from you. So it's basically you should have all the mixes in the basket. You should know what is the best fit in. So if you just go as a drilling engineer and having no idea about geology, basic geophysics, and if you ask questions like that, so it's going to be difficult. And then you tell, hey, I've come from a drilling background, so I don't want to know, and I don't want to acquire any knowledge related to geology and geophysics. So that's not possible. So you should basically have a mix of everything. And the biggest thing in an industry, I'm going to be very precise over here, is that you should understand what your boss wants from you. So that's very, very important. And what is his expectations, how best you can fit to his expectations. And basically one of the biggest problems that we face in India also is that there's a lot of communication gap. People don't want to communicate with their bosses, or perhaps their bosses also feel that the employee should understand without me communicating with him. So this is also a very big problem. This is also a very big hurdle over here. So I feel that this communication should basically be able to bridge the gap. Good communication should be able to bridge the gap, and you should know what your boss has an expectation from your side. And yeah, and that way you can only be able to fulfill it once you have all the mixes with you, just like Anurag told. Hello. Rupal, I think you're on mute.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, sorry, my bad. So yeah, well, that is actually very insightful, and I believe this answers a few of the questions that were asked by the other students. That what are the other skill sets we should be, focusing on if we want to thrive in the industry. So yeah, that's about the job description you're gonna fulfill, and just do not stick to the trivial methods and the trivial studying patterns, because yeah, that is going obsolete after some time. So I do have a question about this. I'll ask that in the end of the lecture. So actually, that would be me just targeting the universities and calling them going obsolete, because yeah, that is happening. So I will do ask this question from you all. So I'll just come back to the list of questions I have emailed you, and I'll come back to the students' question after a while. I'll definitely make sure that all of your queries do get answered. Yeah, so as Shirish also mentioned about the communication and how important it is. So this is more like an extension to that pointer that he mentioned, is the significance of good communication. And how would you suggest like these students get proficiency along with the technical competition to get through the giants like ExxonMobil or Shell, Halliburton, Schlumberger, etc.? So yeah.
Okay, so thing with communication is, Rupal, the more you practice, the more you communicate, the more you practice, the more comfortable you become. So the biggest problem in India is that people, especially I've even seen it in our college, I've seen it in schools and colleges, people restrict themselves. They don't communicate. They feel that, okay, if I study a book, I score 90 percentage or score 95 percentage, and through I'll be able to survive. But when it comes to communicating, when it comes to surviving in the industry, without good proper communication, you cannot sell your work. And I think, and this is a very important thing when it comes to industry, the more you sell, the more relevant you become. Because I've even seen people who are very good at their work, but they are not able to sell their work. They are not able to sell their ideas. And then they just, for them, then for a company, it just, they see, these people are seen just like an employee who comes, who sits on the chair, who doesn't participate. And I think without good communication, you cannot participate. For that, you need to make yourself very relevant. For that, you need to have very good communication. And all these big giants like ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, proficient communication, good communication skills are very important. So that's what I told. The more you practice, the better you become at that. And I would emphasize students to basically start having more GD sessions with each other. It's a very good time. I'm not saying just don't choose any topic on oil and gas. If you're interested in sports, interested in cricket, start communicating. Start doing GDs in cricket. Start doing GDs in sports, football. Start doing GDs on politics, start doing GDs on COVID-19, just start communicating with each other. Do it, use it. It's okay. It's okay if you fumble, if it's okay if you use the wrong word, if it's okay if people laugh. And I'll tell you one thing, people who don't do anything in life tend to laugh at you. It's okay, let them laugh. But the more you communicate, the more you express yourself, the better it's going to be for you in the industry. So industry is all about how you sell your work. You may be having a very good innovative idea in your mind, but if you're not able to sell it, if you're not able to describe it, if you're not able to communicate properly, then what's the use of that idea? Nothing. So you may want to do something good for the company. You want to produce some good profits for the company. You have a very good idea, but if you're not able to sell it, it's of no use. So I think communication is very important, and I think it's a 50-50% scenario. So communication, knowledge, they both go hand in hand, and you need to carry it along very well. So communicate, that's what I was saying. Have good GDs, communicate, try talking to each other, look at good videos, look at good communication videos. It will help you.
Well, just to add a point here, say for example, you did an immaculate project. Say you have created a new mud which will replace oil-based mud used conventionally in drilling oil and gas. Suppose if you are not able to communicate the same to your professors, to the industries, what will happen to that innovation? It will go in scrap, trust me. So having technicality is one aspect, like Shri has said, that is in one hand, but delivering it, what you have done, projecting it in a way that is more easy for the other person in order to understand. Do not use heavy, expensive words of English vocabulary. Nobody gives a heed about it. Speak in simple language. Communication means that your information, what you are speaking, has reached to the front person and he has understood it. So that is the literal definition of communication, and we all should adhere to it. So I would say overall, in everywhere, even in universities, whether you are a student or you are working in a corporate or you are working in sales and marketing job or any possible job, communication, comms is a key aspect for any possible project management and in any possible, I would say, overall industry.
Wow, that is actually very important. So I myself graduated in 2019 from UPES, and I did see a lot of people who actually had fancy pointers, 9 point something, 8 point something, but they just, they were just this close to get to the company of their dreams, but they couldn't cross it because they were not able to sell themselves. So as harsh it may sound, but yeah, Anurag and Shirish were completely right when they said you have to be very vocal. You have to know how to sell yourself and make your point clear to the people who are listening to you.
And I would like to add a point, Rupal, over here. So I was reading on one of these articles from McKinsey. So they were giving basically, they were talking about crude oil prices. So I had read several articles before coming here. I was just going through various articles. So what I found out with McKinsey is that the communication language that they used, so it was all high vocabulary and the kind of terms that, but if you would basically look at why McKinsey was able to sell that article, because it had no content, to be very honest. It had no content, but the vocabulary skills were so high, the vocabulary skills were so good that McKinsey is able to sell itself. And if you would basically compare it in terms of content, content was absolutely, it was just one point that this is why crude oil prices are falling. Other than that, it was just vocabulary. So I would even emphasize people also that make it simple, make it good. If you're not able to, it's not important to use high vocabulary. Try to express your idea. Simplest of language, simplest of words, just express yourself and you'll do well.
Actually, I would back you up on that McKinsey thing. So I also read McKinsey's article on the McKinsey Insight application, and I've noticed like they use those heavy vocabulary words to make it super fancy, and I have to just go back to the dictionary and understand what the person is trying to convey. And once I, drill it down to the simpler words, the content is probably half or maybe less than half of what it was written. So this is a very valid point, guys, and I think you should, understand the significance and be simple, but be clear with what you are trying to communicate. Like what goes in here should come right from your mouth. It shouldn't be really fancy, but should make sense.
Well said.
Yeah, so that's a brilliant way to put it, you guys. So there's another question that I would like to talk about. As it was mentioned, like you guys talked about the renewals and the other unconventional sources of energies. So what are the odds of our industry that it might go fully unconventional or renewable in terms of sources of energies? And what does it mean for the future? Right. So
overall, the renewables and unconventional sources of energy are the future of this industry. But at this point of time, we are facing immense problems by utilization of these. So for example, you say, okay, solar, let's talk about solar. Solar industry is the one which is, which we say, okay, it is replacing different aspects of oil, but in reality, it is not. There are thousands of technical challenges which are being faced through solar. First thing is calorific value. Say, for example, if I want to run a motorcycle, a bike, say I have Harley Davidson, which is giving me a mileage of 20 km per liter. So if I'm driving that, can the engine be refined to a solar one? No, it will never. It needs a minimum calorific value of 1600 joules, and by which only it will run. So first point is, at this point of time, this unconventional and renewable sources of energy, they are lacking in calorific value, and people are actually working on this. On another note, I would say there are thousands of other advantages which conventional oil and gas does not have. That is the emissions of heavy liquefied gases, which are creating a very big impact to the environment. But these renewable and these renewable and unconventional, these such issues have been eradicated, and we have a very better way which is there in future. So these things will take place not today, but after 5 years, after a span of 5 to 10 years for sure. And this is the future. Trust me, this is the future. But at the same time, the world has come up with a new bright idea of having, say, which is clean fuel. Now, say for example, just to mention about Schlumberger again, since I'm working here, so Schlumberger has a newly opened department known as Clean Fuels. So clean fuels, now company will be investing a lot on this aspect, because they have realized the fact that conventional oil and gas projects are depleting. Earlier, can you believe, Schlumberger is always a pioneer in wireline jobs, right? Drilling and measurement wireline jobs. But with the advent of technology, wireline jobs have been replaced by logging while drilling. So earlier, if I would have been a wireline engineer, I used to earn a royalty of $10,000 per job. But now there are no more wireline engineers, because everything is happening in real time. So with time, this energy, this particular aspect has been changed of extracting oil, which is conventional, and it will move to newer versions, unconventionals, such as shale gas, I would say tight sands, or whatever, or say bitumen, and many more.
Okay, so Rupal, one point that I would add over here, my friend very truly said, renewables is the future. And the only drawback with renewables is that that the calorific value is very less, and perhaps people would not be very much ready to accept it. But a lot of things also depends upon the government policies also, and the way government policies and the rules regulations are working. So the country, the world is shifting towards renewable energy. So the country, so all the countries, the world basically is shifting towards a cleaner fuel, less carbon emissions, less greenhouse effect, a world which would perhaps basically take us back to history with a more clean air. So yeah, so renewables is the future, but still there's a lot of scope that needs to be explored in it. There's a lot of things that needs to be worked out in it, and in the coming years we are going to see that there's going to be a shift. But I don't completely think so that renewables is going to replace the hydrocarbons. But yeah, they're going to eat up a lot of content. They're going to take up a lot of place from the hydrocarbon industry.
Well, yeah, that is another. So it actually, what I can understand from it is, it actually gives you another edge to get expertise into the non-renewables and the other source of energies, and apart from just sticking to the petroleum domain. So that does open doors of opportunities for the young talents and for the existing employees. So I believe it does true, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, it does.
It is completely. And say, like I said, every organization, they have a, say, new renewable department, clean fuel departments, wherein, you know, utilization of existing technology is being taken into consideration to improvise the upcoming technology. So having basics, what you are doing is important, but we have to think about future, right? Nobody is static at this point of time. Things has to be dynamic. So with this dynamism and having aspects of renewable energy, there's gonna be the replacement, and this will take place for sure.
Well, that is very promising. So I just take a moment and acknowledge our technical advisor for Advantage India, Mr. Milay.
Rupal, your voice is breaking.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for attending the lecture and actually answering the questions here on the chat box. So we're really glad you can make it to the
Hello.
session. So a lot of students.
Hello. Us.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, Path, I can hear you.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
So am I audible?
You are not.
Rupal, your voice is breaking.
Rupal, your voice is not clear. Can you repeat once again what you have said earlier?
I think we have lost her.
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, we can hear you, Path.
Thanks for the amazing session. Actually, my net went down, so I was not in the session. So I just had some few questions. Like, if you are like up for it, can I ask you a few questions? Like,
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, like, I would just want like the previous question that you just said that regarding the renewable thing. So, like, what I've been seeing that there is a recent trend in the industry. Like, if you look at the all the oil and gas major, be it Exxon, be it BP, be it NA, be it Chevron. So they are investing huge chunk of money into like all this clean energy. And right now, I think yesterday only BP signed a $5 billion deal with INEOS, and they sold it petrochemical, like entire petrochemical business to INEOS. So just to reduce their carbon footprint. So how is this going to impact, like, because obviously there will be less jobs. So how is this going to impact the coming generation? And is it ideal for like younger generation to switch their career to like more of this renewable sector? Because in the coming year, it will like, there will be more jobs in the sector.
So Parth, Anurag, you want to answer this or shall I go ahead?
Go ahead. I will follow.
Okay, so Parth, what basically I understood with your question is that looking at the current paradigm shift, we are seeing a lot of investments in the renewable energy sector, and many of the oil and gas companies are also investing a lot in the renewable sectors, and they are basically diversifying themselves from hydrocarbons into renewable energy.
Yes.
So is it a good idea for us also to shift towards the renewable energy? Is that right?
Yeah.
So Parth, like I told before, so renewable energy is a part of energy. So it's just like hydrocarbons. But the thing is that the domain is totally different. So if you think that, okay, I'm a part of hydrocarbons and I can shift into, so doing business and studying about both, it's totally different. And I would still say that, Parth, if you're very much passionate about hydrocarbons, if you're very much passionate about oil and gas, still continue with that, because things are going to happen. The oil and gas industry is going to take turns. As soon as the oil prices rise, companies like BP are again going to start increasing their rig counts. As soon as the prices come down, they're going to decrease their rig count. So crude oil is something that's very volatile. The price is very much volatile. So I would say that part, you should basically be able to understand what you want for yourself. So because the industry is going to change, and there's going to be a glut everywhere. Perhaps in a few years, you may even see some glut in the renewable sector also.
Yes, yes.
You may see some glut into renewable sector also. So it's basically how the market shifts. So presently we see that, okay, we say that renewable is the future, but after say 15 years, 20 years, 20, 25, 30 years, we may see a glut in the renewable sector also. And when we may see people again shifting towards hydrocarbons.
Yeah, no, I
More
agree with the point. I just want like, I'm just saying that.
Yeah. So if you would want to look at the present scenario, yes, present is for the renewables. 20 years from now, 25 years from now is for the renewables. But after that, renewables can also take a U-turn path.
Yeah. No, I'm saying that, for example, like all these companies, like they are like, now they are not exploring anymore. Like they have sold their assets. There are huge M&A deals that have been happening. Like they're selling off their assets. So what I mean to say is, will there be enough opportunities for the coming generation in the oil and gas industry?
They will. So that's what I told you. It all depends upon the oil prices. It all depends upon the current oil prices, the current scenario. It all depends upon demand. So market runs on demand path.
Yeah.
So the more the demand increases, the more opportunities to basically supply that demand also increases. So, and like I told you, like I even expressed this thing before also, crude oil prices earlier 10 years before from now was not competent. So everything was controlled by OPEC. Everything was controlled by the Middle East. But now US erupting as a new oil producer, and perhaps it is even started producing more oil than than all these Arab countries, and it is ready to sell oil at a cheaper rate. Although their investment towards more drilling, more hydraulic fracturing is perhaps more than the Middle East, but they want to sell, they want to capture more of the market. So that's the reason why these oil prices are going low. But the moment the oil prices reaches a stable mark, the demand automatically is going to, so obviously then the demand for rigs are automatically going to increase. The investments are going to increase, and as the investments are going to increase, it's going to create more job opportunities for everyone. So it's all over the market path.
Yeah.
So I'd like to interrupt here for a minute. Perhaps you can actually ask the questions on the chat, because we really have to keep going forward. There are plenty of questions already lying here. So I believe that Shirish did answer more than 3/4 of the question that you have asked. So it's more like the market-driven strategies that you have to follow, and you cannot. And as there has been that somebody has written here that oil is not going anywhere. So I believe that we should be pretty positive about it. And for more details, you can actually chat with him in person, or maybe you can connect with him later on.
Yeah, but
so
oil is going to the structural traps. It is not going anywhere. We're going to the structural traps.
Well, that's a technical pun. It's pretty good. Okay, so I'm sorry, my audio and video just got disconnected. Poor internet connectivity, so can't really help. Well, I'd like to thank Milind sir to be a part of this entire webinar. Right now, he's a technical advisor, and I'm so glad that he could make it. So, sir, if you're listening to me, thank you so much for being here and for all your support throughout this entire thing that has been happening. Okay, so that brings me to one of the major questions that was asked on the chat, and I also had it in my list, that about the artificial intelligence and the machine learning, the data science. All these words, they sound so fascinating, and they seem like maybe that can be the end of a manual work. Maybe everything is going to be automated. So on the same note, so as we know that AI, ML, data science technologies are dominating everywhere, and oil and gas being no exception, as it was also mentioned by Anurag in our previous questions when he actually brought up the automation and the AI, ML issues. So how important do you think it is for us to evolve in this cutthroat world? Should we get more thorough with it, or should we just let it pass? So, because apparently in petroleum, or maybe in the computer science, on very elementary level, AI, ML has not been taught in colleges. So what would you suggest them? They should go with the external courses? And if yes, would you mind suggesting them, some of them as per your expertise?
Yeah, well, overall, it's a very illustrating point that AI ML is trying to replace the existing oil and gas conventions. Yes, it is happening to some extent, but this is the very start of these aspects in our industry specifically. Now, every company, they have a key performance indicator, right? Say if I cite an example of Chevron, they have a KPI for introducing these courses to their employees. Yes, it is taking place, and there are thousands of advantages by the implementation of these technologies, because oil industry is an industry which is driven by data. So I think somebody has rightly said earlier, people used to say oil is everything, but no, now data is oil. So oil industry has a lot of data which needs to be analyzed. Say, for example, for planning any well, we do offset well analysis. And this is one of the key factor, even though as of now, this offset well analysis is done by different platforms. But with advent of AI and machine learning, what will happen is it will work on pattern recognitions. So the moment I have a pattern, my system will trigger, okay, this is the best zone where I should be drilling, and this is my target layer. So definitely it will reduce manual efforts, what we are doing as of now today. But at the same time, this will actually reduce the utilization of the people. Now, from my experience, let me cite you an example. When I was working with Petrolink in Saudi Arabia, so this has happened to me. So what used to happen earlier, at every rig site, there used to be a well site geologist who used to, and his job was to track only one curve, which was, say, drilling ROP 5 per feet. And based on that, they used to decide the casing points. Exclusively one well site geologist who is handling this curve. Now, Petrolink has come up with a technology. They utilize machine learning, and they kind of did pattern recognition on more than 60 wells of the same kind. And finally, they came up with a solution. Okay, that if you are drilling in the same pad with these kind of wells, this pattern is being observed. This is my casing point. So now the possibility of having a well site geologist at rig site has reduced. So imagine, out of 220, if I have 150 drilling rigs, 150 well site geologists have lost the jobs. But at the same time, I have more accuracy, I can have reliability on the data, and at the same time, AI and ML can give you an indication that this is what is happening. But the final validation would be done by a human, by human intervention only. No technology at this point of time can replace human intervention in oil and gas industry. I'm not talking about other automation, automotive or other, but in oil and gas, human intervention is always required, even if you are having a plan, even if you are having a well plan which is coming from Halliburton's landmark, but it requires a man. So even though the technology is in time very well evolved, there for sure there will be a reduction in manpower. But yes, we should always be accompanying ourselves with these methods, because the best part about AI, ML and other aspects is they are not only centralized to oil and gas. You will open your arena of diversification, right? So by this, your mind will open up, and you can utilize that particular instance in other industries as well. Say, for example, just to cite an example here again, one of my friend, he was working as a drilling engineer, yeah, and he did this, and he was very enthusiastic about doing this. See, I'm not saying that we all should do it. It completely depends on the interest what we have. So he was highly enthusiastic about working on data, Excel and data sets. He did this, I believe, data science and ML course from Upgrade. There's an institution in Bangalore or Mumbai, I'm not sure. So he did this course, and currently he's working with Shell as a data scientist, and he is actually doing all technical aspects, all well realizations, and he's pretty much liking the job. So imagine a company like Shell, they are hiring they are hiring data scientists adequately at this point of time in order to analyze their 1,000 millions of wells what they have drilled until now in entire world.
Yeah, so the one point that I would like to add over here, other than the technical aspect, data science, data analytics, historical data has basically helped in better strategies, helping better strategy making, better decision makings, looking at all those historical trends. Managers, company directors are able to come out with better strategies. They're able to come out with a better ways and means to basically minimize the risk coming in the future. So that way, in order to predict the future or in order to make a predictive future model, data analytics and historical trends is very important. And like my friend truly said, data is the new resource. So it's perhaps in the coming stages, you would see that data is going to even become more expensive than oil. And so data is the new resource and people are going to basically look upon to it in order to go for better decision making.
Okay, so I believe that kind of answered the question that I have asked. So it completely makes sense. And to all the people who asked about AI, ML, and the automation, I believe that actually answers the question. So, okay, so there is another question that is here on the screen, and I've also written. So there are a lot of people who are not from the petroleum background, particularly, like, for example, they can be from computer sciences, they can be from mechanical, they can be from geology, and so on and so forth. So how do you think the industry is welcoming, like, how welcoming do you think the industry is to these kind of people? And if yes, so do they need to possess any particular kind of expertise to enter this industry, or they are good to go with whatever they have been studying as their course plans?
I think every industry basically has particular sections, right? So the industry, oil and gas industry, obviously, if you talk about Shell would be having an analytical division. It would be having an IT decision. It would have an innovative decision. It would have a consulting decision. So yeah, every industry. So this is not the 80s industry where it's okay if it's an oil and gas industry, so it is only going to be confined to drilling engineers or geologists only. So now with the use of technology, with the evolution that is taking place, so industries have many verticals. So yeah, so computer science engineer, I've seen computer science engineers working in various oil and gas domains. I've seen data scientists working in various oil and gas organizations. So they're all welcoming. So yeah, oil and gas industry, the way it has evolved, people from all over the world with different backgrounds are still entertained and they're still welcome. So it's basically on the kind of demand you create. So it's, yeah, so there's a lot of scope for people also from other verticals also.
Okay, I think that answers the question. So, would you like to stress on something very particular as an expertise, or maybe something to study about? Because I believe the people who are in college, they do not know what happens in the industry. So I can speak that for myself and for the people of my batch as well. So what we studied is not exactly what we implement in the industry. So would you like to help them with something particular they can get their mind at, and spend their quarantine or the lockdown time by studying those things, if you have in any mind?
Go ahead, Anurag.
Yeah, well, definitely. Actually, this is the very right time to learn new skills and get ready for upcoming challenges which the industry will be throwing. Now, like I said, every industry is carrying different aspects of job. Now, going at fields and doing good stuff has reduced drastically. So now we have more kind of office jobs wherein entire interpretation is taking place, which is based on the different platforms, and different platforms requires technical knowledge at first. Say for example, if I am producing one KPI, say I am tripping in a hole. So for tripping in a hole, I should understand what is tripping. And then I should understand what is cased hole and open. This is a bit technical, but just citing an example. So I should understand what is cased hole and open hole. So in a similar way, what has happened on the field side, we should be having this imagination of, we should be having this kind of simulation, what is happening on the system. So we are seeing the real-time logs, and we are actually speculating how things are happening at the rig side. So how the software is calculating, this is what is being required. So understanding backends of different software, not only learning clicks. See, trust me, software is a matter of clicks, which anyone in this world can teach you. But what is happening at the back end of it, that really matters, and that is what is required. So I would say, as a whole, if we have time in order to improvise ourselves, do free courses which are being made available at Coursera, or there are plenty of resources which are being available on web. Just utilize it's a game of patience. And I would say the course what has been recently introduced by Nitish, yourself, Rupal and team, that is highly informative, and utilize these courses in order to groom yourself in this pandemic times.
Rupal, my take over here would be very simple. I would still tell that this is a tender age, and I would still tell that you all guys are evolving. You all guys are getting to know more about yourself. I would just say that explore yourself. Every individual has his own strengths. Every individual has his own weaknesses. We tend to start doing a SWOT analysis of an industry. We tend to do a SWOT analysis of an organization. But I would tell that do your own SWOT analysis. Understand. So you understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses. You may perhaps be good at something, and you may be exceptionally good at something. You may be at the same time weak at something. I would tell that make your weaknesses your strengths. Explore yourself. Basically go outside, learn more about the industry, go through the web, check the web, go attend more case studies. So case studies is something. So case studies basically speaks about real life examples, what has happened. So like suppose if we would take a case study on, say, suppose the Mexico oil spill, the US-Mexico oil spill. What basically happened? What was the risk associated over there? Why a company like BP had to pay so many $1 million, and why basically the rig exploded? What was the fault over there? What was the risk associated over there? How could BP have had overcome? What interventions that BP could have taken? What strategies that BP could have taken in order to prevent a risk like this? So once you start going through various case studies, once you start going through various real life examples, you get to know the industry more. You get to know, okay, and once you start reading all these real life examples, case studies, you get to know what is your best fitting, how well you can contribute to the industry. So yeah, you can contribute to the industry as being a petroleum engineer. You can contribute to the industry as being a petroleum manager. You can contribute to the industry in those strategies. So I would just tell that still explore yourself. Learn about yourself, do a SWOT analysis on yourself, go through real life case studies, go through real life examples, and just get to know the industry more better. And yeah, case studies would solve a lot of problems.
Well, that's right. So that's the main reason why a lot of companies emphasize on solving the case studies, because that shows your problem solving skills. So to solve a case study, you don't have to be an expert in petroleum domain. You just need to have a good common sense specifically and a slight business sense so that you can justify your, suggestions when you're writing them.
Well,
so yeah.
Just adding a note here, these case studies now, in order to get a job also, different organization, they put a case study in front of you and they actually try to analyze how are your problems skills are all about. So, and how do you think, because corporate is inculcating all sorts of pressure from your boss, pressure from your client, pressure from yourself, pressure from your peers, pressure, say internet is not working, pressure from your desktop. So you are surrounded by everything. So in such situations, you have limited time and you have to deliver. So all is a game of stand and deliver. It's like Mahendra Singh Dhoni, just wait for the ball and hit it, and it is out of the ground. So overall, emphasizing on case studies is a real value.
Okay, so on the same note, I would like to tell all the participants and listeners here that we at Advantage, we are focusing to get the more of the case studies if possible and the real time and the real software courses for you all. And we believe that we can collaborate with people like Anurag and Shrish more in future so that we can give you insights and we can practically help you to understand what you want to do and how you can pursue it once you actually find out the thing you want to pursue. So that is that I think that pretty much answers the question to all the people who were confused a little bit. I hope this gives you a bit of clarity, a tad bit, not a lot. I really hope it gives you something to catch up on and you can, start working on your skill sets and do not just rely on the obsolete technologies. So, well, I'd like to ask a question this question is specifically for Mr. Shrish. So being an entrepreneur, how was the journey from your organization's inception and how challenging it was for you to make your own name in the industry? And let's not forget the cutthroat industry. So we would like to have some, insights from you, because I'm sure in this chat box, there are few of the people who would love to pursue entrepreneurship. If not today, then maybe tomorrow. So it would be great if you can give some insights on that.
Okay, so Rupal, I basically did my MBA in 2016 and I got placed with Deloitte. And I worked with Deloitte for 1.5 years. And yeah, Deloitte was an exceptionally good organization. The work culture, the atmosphere that they provide, it was exceptionally good. But somehow I used to just think and I used to just feel that, will I be able to do this my entire life? Will I be able to work like this the entire life? Because I always wanted to do something of my own. I wanted to have my own startup. I wanted to have my own business. But working over here in Deloitte, will I be able to do this my whole life? I got this opportunity ahead. I went ahead with this opportunity. I started exploring it out more. It wasn't easy. I would say that initial 6 months, 1 year wasn't easy at all. But yeah, for me, what I learned from various people in the industry is that you need to survive. You need to survive the storm. And once the storm settles down, eventually you will sail ahead. So the biggest problem with business is to get business. That's the biggest problem. Second, after the second problem comes when once you execute the business, your clients are never happy. You need to make them happy. So that's altogether a different approach altogether. Third, in a country like India, I would not be very much harsh over here, but in a country like India, it's another talent, another exceptionally tough job is to take your payments out. So yes, I've worked with all big organizations. I've worked with all big MNCs, right from Tata, Reliance, L&T, Sterlite, AEC. But the biggest problem is that nobody wants to pay you. So in order to get your payments is also another tough job. So that way, yeah, it has been tough. Initially 6 months, 1 year was tough. But what I would emphasize to everyone is that if you've taken a decision in life, go ahead. There are going to be a lot of odds. There are going to be a lot of speculations. There are going to be things against you. But it's just that you need to survive that storm for the time being. And then, yes, if your work has good quality, you will survive, you will sail through, and you will eventually go ahead.
Okay, well, that is great. So, because I see a lot of engineers, they want to pursue entrepreneurship, but they're quite not sure how to start. The biggest problem or biggest obstacle, I would say, is find that first start point. And once you find it, everything eventually falls into the place. So I think that
it does not. The problem is 70 to 80% people after starting it, they just leave. When you start facing the wind, once you start facing all those tough times, once you see that your account is depleting, that you are burning cash and there's no cash flow, it's just cash flow outwards, there's nothing inwards. So people basically, they get demotivated. But that's the storm. That's something that you need to survive. And once you've sailed through that, things become better gradually.
All right. Okay. So I have another question. Like, this is the second last question I have. And after that, there will be one final question. And then probably we're going to wrap up. So this question is for Anurag. So what did you motivate to join this industry? And was it a calculated decision or an experiment that just turned out to be super good for you? So how about your journey so far?
Okay, I won't be lying to you. I was a very naughty guy when I was in childhood. So earlier we used to have a scooter in our home, and that time the petrol tank, it never used to get locked. So I used to open it while playing cricket in my open garden, and I used to take fumes out of it. And from there I realized, okay, what is it, and why it is giving me a different sensation? I'm very frank with you. So this has led me to understand that from where this component is coming and what kind of stuffs from where it is getting accumulated. And moving forward, I would say it was more of a calculated for me, because one of my school senior, he actually joined UPS in for petroleum engineering, and he was the one who actually informed me. And from there, from my childhood, I connected it to this petroleum industry, that this is what, see, when you are in 10th or 11th standard, you come to know that what is fractional distillation, what is oil, what is gas, what is rock. So by that point of time, you understand in basics of geography. So from there, I started. Well, I started my career in 2008 in Andhra Pradesh, in Rajahmundry, which was an oil hub. And from there, I got this infatuation. 2009, moved to Dehradun as a college transfer. And then things get along. Started with career as like you said, within an oil and gas software industry, data code, where I used to work as a geologist, and then moved to Petrolink after my master's, worked on rig sites, gained knowledge, and then moved to Schlumberger, where I am doing performance analysis for entire ADNOC at this point of time. So this was my career journey. And the real motivator was those sparkling fumes, what I used to get from my scooter, that I would say.
So that was a cute story that you cited from your childhood. And I believe, yes, we do know what we want to do, but we just have to realize it in a couple of years, or maybe just take time according to your perseverance and your, your will to understand what you want to do. So
Yep.
that's right, Anurag. It was nice knowing the little story of yours. So there's one more question that is probably going to cover a couple of more questions that I got on the chat box. So, do you believe that the education system that is being followed in the colleges and the universities is now getting obsolete? And do we need more practical and hands on experience to become proficient with the subjects we are following? And on the same note, there was another question that I would like to link with it. So, the question stated that once you are, you got the understanding of your subjects and you enter in your final year, so when you're looking for jobs as a fresher, what you should be focusing on, just to get in the industry, what are those few key pointers or the checklist you should maintain before you enter the industrial front, knowing in the fact that you do not have a lot of hands-on experience? So that kind of combines two questions, and any one of you would like, you can answer the question, whosoever wants it.
Okay, so to start with, I would say overall, I completely second with the thought that what content is being provided by universities is not sufficient enough to cope up the pressure what is there in the industry in actual terms. But let me tell you one example. When you are a fresher, when you are joining any industry, none of the employer in this world expects you to be a Superman. You should not be knowing all the things of the world, but you should be having minimum understanding what profile you are into and what you have to do. So the overall point is, I would say, every industry, if you are a GT, if you are joining as a GT, you will be trained. Industry needs a person who can be trained, not a person who knows everything, right? Because if you know everything, then why are you doing a job? A person, for industries, a person is required who can be trainable. So I would say have a proper balance of technical skills along with interpersonal skills, and specifically grooming. This is what is required. Soft skills have also become a very key factor along with technical. Nobody, see, like I said, you will be trained for doing your job. But in order to get a job, you should be having minimum prerequisites to enter to that industry. And so I would say skills, do not lack in any of that. If you are lacking, because company judges you in overall aspects, right? Because say if in an interview panel there are 4 people, so at that same point of time, one is judging your soft skills, another is checking your technical knowledge, another is checking your hand movements, say soft science, and another is checking your, say, movements of your body. So it's a combination. So overall, you should be I would say you should be an all-rounder and jack of all trades in a nutshell, if I summarize. And by any chance, could you please say your second question, which was adjacent to this?
Okay, so the adjacent question was, do these colleges and universities need to reform their, study pattern so that they can give more hands-on experience to the students and not just sticking to the, the documented and the textbookish knowledge, that I would say?
Completely, I would say completely. There has to be a reformation in college patterns, specifically in third year and fourth year of studies, because in second year we understand what is the exact domain we are studying, right? If you are a second year student and if you are studying drilling engineering, that won't make any sense to you, because it is like studying IIT subjects in fourth standard, sixth standards, I would say. So that is not making any sense. First, come to a platform, make your platform, make yourself grounded, and then look for enhanced skills. So there has to be a reformation, and I think different universities are working on this ideology. They have purchased different licenses of different platforms. Probably in UPS, if I say, they have some paid licenses, if I'm not wrong. But I'm sure, since I was a BTech Geoinformatics student from university, so to be very frank, I was not a software techie guy, but I used to see that there are some ArcGIS licenses where people used to work, and they used to digitize and do many things. But yeah, definitely practical exposures are being required, and they should be made a confirmed part in their curriculums. Completely seconded.
Yeah, the universities that way should upgrade themselves. They should upgrade themselves with more technology. They should give a more practical exposure to students. So student is studying, but he doesn't know how to apply it. So it doesn't actually make any sense. And what basically the university promotes is marks. So the more marks you get, you branded more intelligent, you branded a better guy, you branded a better future, which is actually not the case. So universities don't emphasize on personality development. They don't emphasize on you increasing your chances of getting into a job. They don't emphasize on you to get into a job and surviving. They don't give you that practical exposure, which I think is very important. I think universities should basically update themselves. And like I told before also, more case studies, more examples, more real life examples, more exposure, more exposure to industries would eventually help them out, would eventually make them know what is good, what is bad, how basically we can fit in, what is the best fit for us. So yeah, that way I think universities should upgrade themselves, and this is how things should go ahead.
That was brilliantly answered, and I think we, as both our speakers have said, I think we all students should take that in account and follow our further curriculum and further studies into the same pattern. So, well, I believe we have, I have exhausted my list of questions, and on the chat box, I can see there is one question that was asked by a student that can a fresher know their own capabilities, whether he would like to study offshore or onshore, as we cannot take both the things together or specialize in one of them.
Well, to answer this question, a fresher cannot take, because this mind will not come when you are, I would say, when you are in your juvenile stages of your graduation. If this would have come, then what is the use of experience? So at that point of time, offshore, onshore, see, I know it's kind of an elective which is there in curriculum, but this is where you need to talk to your university, you need to talk to your professors that how can I choose an elective? Because you never know. See, point is, if you are entering into an industry, nobody will tell you that you will be going to offshore, you're going to work in offshore or you're going to work in onshore, right? Because industry is common, only the aspects are different. But if you want to do a specialization, say for example, there are many people who are very keen to do their masters, right? Say masters in technology from either IITs or from Stanford or say CSM in US. People tend to do MS or MBA, like Shrish has done MBA in energy as per his choice. So we should see, at least as a fresher, we should know what we want to do in our lives, right? I completely understand. See, it's easy for me to say. When I was a fresher, even I was not knowing. But yes, I was knowing that this is my path and I have to achieve it. So conceiving the path is required. At least you should know that, okay, I am interested, I am highly enthusiastic about AI/ML. Okay, so let me do this course along with my drilling engineering. See, doing additional things would not harm you. They will not, they will not take you to be more prone about any disease. It is helpful for you. It will give you better health. It will give you better account of your, it will make a very good portfolio of yours while you are there in graduation. So I would say for offshore, onshore, this is not a right time to understand, but at least talk to your professors to remove this elective, learn both. Because for me in my master's, I also had this point whether I have to take exploration or I have to take drilling. But I tend to, well, I have taken drilling, but at the same time, I learned of exploration also. So it's completely honest.
On the same note, I would like to say that there are a couple of courses on drilling. If you are interested from our Advantage India, and we're also focusing on the communication and the analytical courses like Excel, and futuristic course will be Tableau. And so this is all lined up for the students who want to explore more and take more advantage of this quarantine and the lockdown period, because you sure as anything are not going back to college for at least the end of this year. So just make most of this time and take all the notes and accounts that was shared by both of our speakers. And I believe we have exhausted the time and the questions and everything for this lecture. Is there anything you both want to share to conclude this webinar?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to I would like to thank you, Rupal. I'd like to thank Nitish. I'd like to thank everyone who has attended this session. It's really been helpful. And thanks for allowing me to speak to all those students. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to express my ideas, my views on a particular topic and an industry program. I just hope my ideas and views are helpful for them. They are able to explore more. They're able to actually take it to their advantage and do better. And yeah, thanks for giving this opportunity to speak out, to tell them. And it's basically good to speak to such a big audience, to speak to such enthusiastic and such really people who are very much interested in doing something. It feels very much motivated, it feels very much good. So thank you for providing this opportunities. And every person over here, all those questions you have asked, all the topics, all the suggestions, all the things that you have raised were really good. And the audience has been really very interactive. Thanks for that. Thank you.
Well, as a concluding note, I would like to thank all, specifically Advantage, for providing me this platform to speak what I have gained as an experience, and also to the list of audience who have raised beautiful questions which are related to, I would say, technical as well as management part of this industry. But overall, I would say, do not fear. I know that, see, I know time is not running good. This is, entire world is suffering through it. But always remember, every night has its own day, and the day will come up with a belligerent sun. So trust me, this will also pass, and we have a bright streak of future which is coming up. So get yourself geared up for that, and feel free to contact us anytime, myself, Srish, or you can take a path from Advantage team to reach us. We are always free to answer your queries, and we will be pleased to do that. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was so energetic and so positive to hear those words from you and Shirish. Well, I think so. I'm very honored to take this webinar myself, and thank you for being so patient and answering every small detail and points that I have raised and the students have raised. So the students thanking you over the chat, and I believe this was a double-sided thing. It was like the students were very interactive, and you guys took that in stride, and you maintained the momentum of the webinar throughout this 1.5 hour. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of the entire Advantage India team to say yes for this webinar, and we would be collaborating soon for such kind of talks, and next time with more further focused topics, for example. So let's hope to catch up soon for these webinars, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you, Rupal. Thank you, Nitish. It was good talking to you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was.
Thank you everyone for joining it. Thank you.